Hey, it's Steve Riley. Welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Today's guest is Susan Drumm, a Harvard trained lawyer, CEO advisor, USA Today bestselling author, the founder of Emeritage Leadership. She hosts The Enlightened Executive, a podcast ranked in the top 1.5% worldwide, where she interviews leaders and experts on practical ways to make better decisions, build healthier teams, and perform under pressure. Her book, The Leader's Playlist, turns music and neuroscience into a simple routine for shifting your state before high stake moments. Before launching her company, Susan consulted with BCG, Boston Consulting Group, led marketing and Six Sigma at NBC and GE, and advised executive teams. With that, Susan, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. I want to know how you went from Harvard to becoming a CEO, advisor, coach, and how in the world did music come into this?
Yes, yes. I have quite the eclectic background, and one I'll even mention that you didn't mention, which is I have a master's in acting from the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. So it starts to give a window a little bit in how the music came in. But
Well,
um,
wait a minute. We also have a degree from Carnegie Mellon. Is that correct?
yeah, yes, that's right.
All right. So, what's the Carnegie Mellon degree? And then we'll talk about the London Academy.
Yeah. So, because that came after law school, by the way, the acting degree, believe it or not. So, I love school. Can you tell? I went to, yes, I did. I had undergrad business major at Carnegie Mellon and then went to Harvard Law School, thought I was going to be a lawyer. And I did love the study of law, but I was coming out with quite a bit of loan debt, and this is back in 1995, right? And so it felt like the only options for me were to go to work at the really large law firms and basically sign my life away. That's what it felt like. And that's what I saw when I worked during the summers. And I felt like there was such inefficiency coming from a business background, such inefficiency that I saw going on at these law firms. And it I didn't want to be a part of it. It didn't seem like the second year associate wasn't happy. The fourth year associate wasn't happy. The partner may be happy because they now had some money. And that's not to say that's true for everyone, of course, but certainly for me, I didn't think that this was a good fit. But what am I going to do? I'm at Harvard Law School. I'm graduating with this massive loan debt. And at the same time, I started taking classes at the Harvard Business School and transferring them over. And so I did both of those things and discovered consulting. And that's how I got into BCG. So I did still take the bar in New York and passed. And every year I have to sign that I'm retired from the practice of law. But indeed, I have never practiced law, but I got the law degree. And here's what it gave me, though. It has, I think law is so good in teaching you how to make finer and finer distinctions. And usually that's applied to case law, right? What I use that skill now is to apply it to how to make distinctions in mindset or how people think and really show them that they're looking at something with a certain set of beliefs and assumptions. And if they shift that, a whole new set of actions will occur to them.
I like that because you're really trained as a critical problem solver as a lawyer. You really have to go and look at the facts, look at the assumptions, and analyze, and strategize on how to solve the problem from different angles. So it makes perfect sense to me that the consulting career was calling to you. And you were smart. You looked upstream at some of the larger firms and went, "Yeah, that I just doesn't look like a great life for me. Doesn't look like something excites me." And a lot of the people ahead of you in the food chain weren't happy. So you're like, "Man, not for me, not for me." And so you went into consulting. How did the music come into this?
Yes. So then out of consulting, I did that for a number of years. And it was good in the sense of really understanding how strategy can turn a company around. But my next experience after that was to go work for NBC television in marketing and business development. But first, I came in as a black belt in Six Sigma. So,
Okay, now we need to stop. We need to stop right there.
yeah.
We need to stop right there because that in itself is very, very. I have to be careful on because our podcast is clean. That is very. I don't call it badass, but we have to edit that out. But that in itself is a pretty badass. So you are like an intense lifetime learner. So explain what a black belt in Six Sigma is for people who have no idea what that is, because probably
Yeah.
like there's probably 5% of our audience that will know what that is. So explain what that is.
So the funny thing is, the way it was when the recruiter explained it to me, it's like being an internal consultant. You're just going to come in at NBC and be an internal consultant. Now, it's a methodology that GE, who used to own NBC, used in all their manufacturing based businesses, which at its core is to find statistical variation in processes and reduce that variation so that what you come out with is more repeatable, scalable process. Now, imagine applying that to NBC, and you can get an idea of how welcoming the marketing and sales division that I was supporting in my role felt about this GE imposed process.
Yeah. I'll do a really sloppy way of explaining it for our audience who've been through our programs. This is a high fine magnifying glass way of problem solving with process. So for those of people that are fans of the book The Goal, fans of lean thinking, we've had lean thinking and lean process people on podcasts before. So you really brought in a super high level training on process and distinctions around process to an organization that probably wanted nothing to do with it. That's fair.
That's fair. And what I learned in that process is you can have the greatest strategy in the world, but if the culture doesn't support it, you're dead in the water.
Perfect. That's perfect. That's perfect. It makes perfect sense. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt your story, but for the people
Yeah,
that
no.
are following along, I want them to understand this is in itself. Everything else that you're doing is pretty impressive, but this little thing is in itself a really remarkable achievement by itself. So keep going. I'm sorry.
Well, it was funny because within, I would say, I can't remember, maybe it was within a year, they disbanded our group. And so we were left to sort of scramble and find other positions in the company. And I did get a good position as a director of marketing and business development. So I did some of that work for a bit. But honestly, I still didn't feel like this was meaningful work. This was a fit for me. And and now I'm feeling kind of lost. And I'm not sure what I want to do. Okay, I tried law, that wasn't it. I tried consulting. It was okay, but I know there was a couple projects where I was looking at the strategy for hydroelectric turbines in York, Pennsylvania and going there every week, and not that there's anything wrong with that except for me that didn't get me jazzed, right? I was not. I was having trouble kind of motivating myself around any of these. And in a way, to me, just going to school was like I could just go back to school and learn some. But I'm now like maxed all loan capacity at this point, so I can't keep doing that. But I need to find something. And I had a little bit of a break. I had moved to London. I was married at the time for his job, and I decided I'm just going to pursue something I'm passionate about. And I know this is crazy, but I love acting and music, and I'm just going to try out for one of these postgraduate courses over there. And that's where I got in and I did that work. And little did I know how much that was going to actually influence what I did in my career. It's sort of like that crazy wild hair idea that actually, and I didn't even know, people thought I was crazy and I didn't even know what I was going to use it for. All I knew is that I was sort of wanted to feel like I was pursuing some type of passion or something I was motivated by.
That makes perfect sense. So you're doing this highly analytical work and you're like, oh my God, I can't get excited to go to work. And then you flip the other way, say, okay, I want to find something that kind of lights me up. I get excited for, and like you said, jazzed up. And so you tried the music path and you applied. What happened next?
So I I was very interested in the acting world, and I learned so much that I kept thinking there's got to be a way I could bring this back to business. As an actor, you have to deal with that inner critic, that voice inside your head, because if you don't get a handle of that, it's going to influence how you can show up authentically with your acting partner. You also develop such deep empathy skills because you have to really inhabit your character, no matter what villain or hero that they are, but really start to see the world from their perspective. And all of these skill sets, I kept thinking, gosh, leaders that I've worked for could actually really use these, but I don't know how. And this is back in early 2000. I don't know how or where you would bring this type of work in. Came back to New York, did look at acting for a couple of years and decided, gosh, the actual business of acting is quite tedious, and you don't really like it's sort of 10 years of doing nothing before anything you would hope pop. And I think sort of a misnomer. You don't realize how much time people spend doing almost absolutely nothing, like waitressing or whatever it is, right? And I'm like, my brain is going to mush here. Like I'm not. And so that's when I discovered a niche in consulting, which was leadership development. And I went to work for a boutique consulting firm that wanted people with the BCG background. And they were very interested in my acting background. And so they really taught, it was sort of the intersection between strategy and leadership development. And they really taught me some of the core work around leadership development. And I do a lot of facilitation and speaking as a result of that. So all of that played in, and I went out on my own in almost 20 years ago in 2006 and started my own firm and have been doing that ever since. So I finally found my groove after trying a number of different angles in my career. But the interesting thing is none of them were wasted. Each one factors into what I do today.
That is just a fascinating journey. And so, for our audience, could you tell them exactly what you do today? So we know it's leadership development, but how does that play out? How does your journey, how's this shaped the book, The Leader's Playlist? How does this all play out for you?
Happiness is decided by us. We have the power to control it, to have it, and to design it however we see fit.
It doesn't matter how strong you are, it's how synchronized you are that drives you forward.
The difference in AI is that it is a unique innovation in the world of communications.
I kept doing the same stupid things over and over and over, expecting a different response. That's the definition of insanity. You've got to figure out, what do you care about?
I came for the money, and I'm staying for the great life.
Passion, knowledge, and then monetization.
You don't get the culture that you want, you get the culture that you are.
Oh my God, Atticus was amazing. That's subliminal messaging.
The biggest improvement is just being way more present to my family.
The community is phenomenal.
I'm surrounded by exceptional legal professionals.
Atticus saved my life.
Building a perpetual law firm is not about building a law firm at all. It's about how you lead a great life.
Your journey, how's this shaped the book, The Leader's Playlist? How does this all play out for you?
Yes, yes. So I focus on helping leaders understand where they get stuck in patterns, how to disrupt those patterns, and how to create new ones. I believe effective leadership is generated from pattern recognition and pattern disruption. And that everything we see is a pattern. There's patterns all around us, and we don't often know what pattern we're stuck in. Sometimes we discover we're stuck in a pattern, but we just can't get ourselves out of that. And there are a couple of different modalities that I use to do that work. So at its highest level, I would say the thought leadership is around that angle. What I'm actually doing that people would recognize is executive coaching, leadership development, designing programs for professional services firms, as well as tech, healthcare, and financial services. Those are primarily some of the places that I'll play. We'll design development programs for their leaders. We do a lot of team coaching and team development as well. So each of these areas are what we do, and people might recognize what that is. But in how we go about it is this idea of pattern recognition.
I have to say, it sounds like we do the same thing, but what you do is much cooler. I'm just thinking to myself, we are in the development business. We are in the
Yeah.
leadership business, the team development business, teaching lawyers how to be better leaders. But
Yeah.
it sounds like to me what you've done and the approach you're taking is very exquisitely cool. So keep going. So talk to me about pattern recognition. I'm totally intrigued because I would love to be a better leader. I would love to be a better manager. I'd love to be better at program design. So I'm totally engaged with what you're talking about, but I want to keep you on task.
Yes. Yes. So I think, over the course of doing this work, I discovered my own superpower, and I help leaders find their superpower, and also what comes with it is their liability too, their blind spot. My superpower is pattern recognition and pattern disruption. Even when I go back to taking the LSAT, I did not take one of those Kaplan courses or, to take them. I just took 8 practice tests, and I could see the patterns and the types of questions that they were asking, so that I could anticipate what the answers were. And when it came time to actually take the LSAT, I only missed 2 questions. So I scored in the 98th percentile. That, of course, helped me get into a school like Harvard. And what I started to realize over time is that I have this gift, and I want to show people how they could see their own patterns and how to shift them. And so I think as human beings, we think we're chameleons and can see 360 degrees, but we can't. We have a central vision and a peripheral vision. And where we point our focus of attention, that's what we see. But there's something behind our head we can't see, and that's our blind spot. And that's true of every human. And so I help people recognize what their pattern is of where they put their focus of attention. Because with that, there comes a gift. You get really good at seeing that direction. And we all have a superpower and a gift. But we also have this liability, a liability blind spot, let's say, the thing that we can't see behind our head. And I think the work that we do is start to become aware of that, start to build some capacity to kind of widen the aperture and notice the patterning, but also to develop. And why we do a lot of work with teams is you want people on your team who are looking in that direction of your blind spot. And which brings me to one of the modalities. So there's two modalities I'm going to talk about today that I use to help people understand pattern recognition and disruption. One is called the Enneagram, and the other one is using music. Now, the Enneagram is particularly powerful because it very much maps who is looking in that direction. And if I'm arguing, no, it's blue, it's blue, it's blue, and you're saying, no, it's yellow, it's yellow, it's yellow. With this mapping, when you do it with a team, you can understand why that happens and how actually the person that's arguing that it's yellow is your best friend in terms of growth. They have something to teach you, and you have something to teach them. And so if you can harness this kind of initial conflict, you can actually create better team performance coming out of it in a way that you may have been resistant to initially. And so helping teams really understand their compilation, also what perspectives are missing on the team that they need to kind of retroactively fit for, is one way I help the team recognize the pattern that they're in, but also particular leaders and what their pattern is and how to be open to differing perspectives. And I call it cognitive diversity at the end of the day. It's sort of like making sure that you have different types of thinkers on your team so that you create the best decisions. But you're going to have to be able to have skill to work through the conflict.
So your argument basically is that this gives someone access to see that superpower, and at the same time appreciate that where their blind spot might be, you're bringing someone else's superpower to problem solve at a whole different level. Because if you're coming in from one angle, you're only going to see that angle. You're only going to see that it's that color. But what your argument is someone else has a different way of seeing it. They may be able to give you a completely different perspective of the problem and realize that the problem that you think is the problem isn't the problem. It's something totally different. Am I getting that?
Yeah, you're getting it right.
Okay.
And typically we'll hire people that sound and look like them, let's say, or think like them. And that could be good and easy. It will be easier, but you may not be getting the best decision making as a result. Now, the other way is more challenging because then there's more conflict on your team. So we need to give people the resources to be able to work through that conflict so that there's a greater appreciation and a deeper level of listening to get to a better decisions through that process.
Yeah, your argument is 1 + 1 is not 2, but like 11. But the plus is the ability to skillfully argue or dialogue through the diversity of opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. You're incredibly intelligent. I'm just trying to hang with you right now, and I'm getting worn out doing it. So keep going. Keep going.
Oh, you're very kind. That's an arena that I think really helps people see and leverage their gift as well. And so I don't want to discount that. I think it's really important that you know what that strength is and you play to that strength. And also, we're always a work in progress. So what is that blind spot? What is that next level of growth?
You're depressing me, that work in progress. It was something my father would always say to me. It's character development. I'm done. I don't want to be more of a character than I am today. So I'm done. So keep going. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was just thinking about that.
Yeah. Well, so I'm always interested in developing tools and techniques that help people recognize these ruts that they get in and how to shift them. So that's where the music part comes in. What I discovered, I've always loved music. Obviously, I studied it as part of this acting and music background. But what I discovered is that music helps you recognize patterns that you're in more quickly and shift them more quickly because of music's impact on the brain. Music allows new neural networks to form more quickly in the brain because it lights up all 4 regions of the brain at once, and it allows these synapses to form. Almost think of it like a fertilizer. So if you're looking to make change in your life, anything you do when you pair it with music, and I'm going to talk about how you do that, anything that you do, they pair will happen more quickly as a result of embedding the music in what you're trying to do.
Okay, that's crazy cool. Keep going. That's crazy.
Yes. So what do I mean by that? So think about if you've ever heard of the music therapy that they're using in hospitals and some nursing homes, particularly, let's say, for Alzheimer's patients who have become unresponsive. When they put their favorite music on, music from their era, they literally come alive. There's a measurable increase in eye contact, in talkativeness. It's sort of like they get plugged back in, they reconnect. And this can be seen on an MRI where all the parts of the brain are now re-talking to each other. And the effect is so profound, it can last for 20 minutes, even after the music stops, till eventually where those synapses go back dormant. Now, if music can do that for Alzheimer's patients, my argument is that music can help us recognize when we're stuck in a pattern and shift that to something we need to do differently. Making change is hard. It is so hard. The analogy I use is you've got an 8-lane highway, and that's a neural pathway that you've built so many times because that's your habit and that's what you do, right? And sometimes that's an 8-lane highway to hell. I mean, think about the stuff that you get triggered on, right? And you're and you just end up going, that's just you're just down that 8-lane highway to hell, right?
Yeah, but I know this way. I know this way, Susan. I know it's the path to hell, but I know this 8-lane highway to hell. I know this.
And so how do you And maybe you're like, God, I know I shouldn't get angry every time this happens, but I do, right? And I can't help myself. I get it, because you've built this 8-lane highway. So how do you get off that highway? Well, you take the first exit. Learning a new skill, or learning a new, like trying to interrupt that, is literally like taking your car off the highway and going into the forest and blazing a new trail. It's bumpy, it's uncomfortable, but the more traffic that road gets, the more it becomes a 2-lane highway, and then a 4-lane highway, and then an equal sized 8-lane highway to your highway to hell. And that's ultimately what you want to go. But man, does that take a lot of effort, because you got to keep going, working that path and working that path and working that path. So I know, because I'm in the business of change and helping clients make change. So I was looking for what are things that can speed up this process for people so that they can more quickly get on the new road. And that's where I started to discover music and how music can shift our state and our emotional well-being, and therefore get us on the new path.
I'm all ears. No pun intended, but keep going, because I'm totally hooked into this conversation.
So I'll tell you a little bit of how I discovered this, and then I'll give an example for how I use it with a leader, because I think that will really come alive. So I was dealing with the end of a bad breakup in a personal relationship. And, it hit me particularly hard because there was betrayal involved, and I couldn't seem to let go. Here's my highway to hell, the resentment that I had over what had happened. Right. And I'm sure everyone in some point can relate to somewhere or something in your life where you felt like you were a victim, victim mindset, let's just say, not a victim of a crime, but I'm talking about like trust was broken. You essentially got screwed over. Right. And so I knew as a coach that this loop of resentment wasn't serving me. But every time I thought about it, I just get I felt stuck. And at some point I was just getting sick of it. I wanted to let it go, but the 8-lane highway to hell kept sucking me down. Right.
Yeah.
And
you're like,
so
but I know this highway. I know this highway.
Yeah.
I like this highway.
Yeah.
And I get to be right on this highway. And I am the victim. I don't have to be responsible on this highway.
Right.
I am right on this highway. I get to be right.
You do, but you get a short-term payoff of being right, but you pay a long-term cost. And that cost happens in your health. It happens in the results that you're trying to produce, because there's no growth. There's no learning. If I'm right and there's nothing I could have done, and circumstances and events happen to me, I believe there's nothing I can do to affect the situation. There's no growth that happens there. And so you stay stuck. And that's essentially what I was. I was stuck.
Okay, let me make sure I get this straight. Because what you're arguing is a very powerful position, which is if you're right, you're always stuck.
I think it's a little bit more, I want to go to not right, but let me define what I mean by if you're stuck in a victim mindset, which is,
Okay.
And let me define it. Circumstances and events happen to me. I believe there is nothing I can do to affect a situation. When you come at it from that angle, then you are essentially, there's no opportunity for growth. If you're, let's say at its purest form, there is an opportunity for growth. Let me contrast that to a responsible mindset, which says circumstances and events happen as a direct result of my actions, non-actions, and interpretations. I believe there is always something I can do to affect a situation. And the place you want to look there is actions, non-actions, and interpretations. So when you can start to see the world from that way, you have power again. And you're shifting out of powerlessness.
That's very powerful. So you're basically, if you're stuck, what you're giving someone is a mindset or a framework, basically a key to get unstuck, if I'm hearing it. So let's do that one more time. And I know you've probably done this 1,000 times, but explain the definition one more time, please.
Sure. So a responsible mindset, and I want to make sure that it's very clear there's no blame in this. And often what we do is like, well, if I have to take responsibility, we're not talking about blame. Leave blame out. That is not useful. A responsible mindset as a leader. And again, I'm in the world of leadership. So I'm not talking about crimes. I'm talking about being a leader when you operate from a perspective of a responsible mindset. And to me, this is the fundamental core mindset of any leader, is that circumstances and events happen as a direct result of my actions, non-actions, and interpretations. I believe there is always something I can do to affect a situation. To me, that is taking true ownership.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love it. Sorry to interrupt, but that's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a very elegant framework to reposition, reframe, and re-examine somewhere that you might be stuck, that you might have felt powerful in being right, but no power in making change and getting out of that lane.
Absolutely. It's very powerful for leaders. I'll tell you, I just, was it last week? I worked with an executive team where I had them first tell a story from the perspective that they, got screwed over, similar to my story. I had them talk about a business or business-like situation in which they were essentially screwed over. And their job was to convince their partner, they were telling this to a partner, I broke them into twos, that they were basically, like a victim in this circumstance. And then I had them talk about, as they did this, they had to convince their partner. They got feedback on how convincing they were. And I had them connect to what were the emotional experiences of going through that. And they would say things like angry, frustrated, right? I was stuck in resentment, all of these kind of emotional pieces. Well, then I asked them to tell the same story from the standpoint that they were 100% responsible for what happened. Not 50%, not 25%, but like now tell a version of the story as if you were 100, and don't fabricate anything, same facts. Can you tell and can you look for places where there was interpretations that you could have made that were different, actions you could have taken that you didn't? And I have them tell that story, the same story from that perspective. And first, there's lots of resistance because believe me, we are attached to our victim stories. But when they tell that story from that perspective, I ask them, what did it feel like to adopt a responsible point of view? And what they came back with was like, I felt a sense of peace. I felt like more empowered. I felt closure. I felt like learning, growth. And so I said, so I put these two lists of emotional experiences, and there are people that say what we're really after is a set of emotional experiences. So if you would rather feel empowered, strong, peaceful, or would you rather feel angry, frustrated? And yet we choose the victim story all the time. Now, why do we do that? Because there must be some payoffs to telling the victim story, right? And we go through the payoffs, but we also talk about the prices. And we do the same thing from a responsible point of view. We talk about the prices of adopting a responsible point of view, and we talk about the payoffs. But what they get to see when everything is mapped out is that the payoffs of a victim mindset are short-term in nature, but you pay long-term prices. And the prices of a responsible mindset are short-term in nature, but you get long-term payoff.
Very powerful.
It is. But I'm going to go back to the story of me getting stuck because it's a human being. I know about this stuff and I still get stuck in it, right? Where I was stuck in life was happening to me. And like he did me wrong, right? But I knew that wasn't serving me objectively. I just couldn't let it go. And so that's where I discovered how music, I decided, when I put on, and at the time it was Bruno Mars' song, 24 Karat Magic. And when I would put that song on, I forgot all about whatever blah, blah happened. And I would just be in like a different state. I noticed this and I'm like, okay, every time I start to do this, I'm just going to either think of Bruno Mars and it just brings a smile to my face, or I'm going to like literally play the song. And it worked so much that I created a real playlist of songs that had this effect for me. And I called it my empowerment. I am empowered. And it was all these, and then I just sort of practiced being in this state. And what I found is the more I did that, the easier it was to let go of that old highway. And the easier it was, I could shift in the moment when I caught myself like, nope, not going down there. I'm going down this path. And that's why I'm like, there's something here.
So you were using music to hack your emotional state.
Exactly.
Got it. I love it. I love it because there's, I have playlists for workout. I have playlists for focusing. I have playlists for doing certain things, in life, driving. I have a driving playlist, and there are things, music that I particularly enjoy. So I'm following along. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. We know music shifts our state. It's why we work out to music, right? But what I believe is we can take it further and notice the patterns that we get ourselves stuck in and use music to be able to shift that and move that out. And so I have people start to really understand the pattern. I have them create sort of that anchor song that best represents when they're on that highway to hell. So they're like, oh my God, there's Adele again, right? I'm not doing that. And then what is the new playlist? And part of it is practicing starting your day in that state. It's using it when you're out in nature, because that's when also your brain is a bit more relaxed and it will allow those neural pathways, and really practicing being in that state. But then using it to shift out when you notice you're not when you're on the highway, and what's your version of Bruno Mars that can shift that.
Perfect. All right, Susan. So one of the things I've noticed is that I am triggered emotionally by certain songs. Like certain songs bring back memories and powerful memories. I lost my father recently, and we had his favorite song was Andrew Bocelli, "Time to Say Goodbye," and we played at his funeral. Now I cannot listen to the song; like it powerfully connect to the song, and I've caught myself actively finding songs that have no emotional attachment to, so I can create new emotional attachment to songs that I've never heard before. And so like on this whole Benson Boone kick, and talk about links for people to know who this kid is, but finding music that doesn't bring up negativity and doesn't bring up, sad moments of my life, so to speak. So you're really kind of teaching people. So you're teaching me to unhack as I'm listening here. I'm like, oh yeah, so this is like a real experience that my brain gets engaged by certain songs. So if you were to give an audience member some first and foremost like ways to create an empowering playlist, to find, they don't have your gift of pattern recognition, but to try and take a practical piece of advice and maybe some resources that they could turn to, that you could point them to explore this experience. Because I'm totally like tuned in, no joke, no pun intended, but I'm totally tuned into what your point is. And I think you're onto something brilliant. Really well done. Really well done. So talk to me about practical resources, what you would advise people, and where people can get more information from you and your company.
Yeah. Happy to. I want to key in on something that you mentioned just about songs. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't ever feel negative emotions or depleting emotions. They're actually really important. They're important data, information that we need to pay attention to. For instance, anger. When we feel anger, it lets us know that a boundary has been crossed or a value has been dishonored. And we want to be able to feel that emotion so that the gift in anger is the ability to take action to reestablish the boundary or the value, right? And if we never allow ourselves to feel the anger, we won't take that move, and then we'll have loose boundaries, and that won't be good either. What I'm suggesting more is using this process when you're stuck in a pattern of anger. You ever know anybody who's gotten stuck in a pattern of anger? Yep.
I know someone intimately that
Yeah.
gets stuck in a pattern of anger.
That's the piece that I'm talking about. So I really want to make that clarification. And when you talk about that beautiful story about your father, music can be there's why when we go through breakups or other grieving process, we do want to listen to sad songs because we want to process that. And music can be a powerful way that we do that. And so I think that is really beautiful. And because really being stuck in a pattern is a loss of freedom. We're on autopilot, where the machine is taken over, right? And that's ultimately what I'm here is to help people create more freedom in their life, freedom to choose versus the 8-lane highway to hell. So the resources that I have, as you mentioned, a simple way maybe to find your superpower and some of the liabilities is to I have a free quiz. It doesn't take very long. It's at susandrumm.com. And that's my personal brand site. And there you can take the quiz. But here's what's kind of special about it. Once it'll give you what your result is, but it'll also point you to the chapter in the book that best is similar to maybe what showed up as your superpower. And in the book itself, the Leader's Playlist, I talk about this concept and I talk about how a lot of these patterns got formed in childhood and they've stuck with us. So they're deep-seated patterns. And I also talk about the neuroscience behind how music works. But then I go into 9 short stories about how different leaders have been stuck in certain patterns and how they've used music to shift. And I actually provide their actual playlist of what music they listen to. So
Awesome.
when you take the quiz, it'll say you might want to check out chapter 4, where I talk about John and his pattern. Here's the music he used, but you need to find the expression of it for you. It's not the same music. You've got to look at what is the music doing to you. And I can't really dictate that. That's for you to discover. But at least his playlist will give you some inspiration for other types of songs that could help you.
How cool is that? So we're going to put everything in the show notes. We'll put all the links in the show notes. Any other practical advice or recommendations to our audience?
Yes. Well, that's like I would say the first step. I have a masterclass that will take people through this process, help them find that pattern, how to use music. I would say I particularly focus on leaders, but this works for anyone. I had, when I just recently did a speaking engagement, parents brought their son who was early in college, really struggling. And this was just really helped him unlock some ways that he was stuck. And so you can use it that's why I say for your leadership and your life, it's got a broader application. So I would say any type of music is okay. You want to notice how the music is impacting you. So I would also say a tip is be more selective in perhaps what you're listening to. What do you notice how the music might be impacting you? And you have to start paying attention to notice that, because oftentimes we're not paying as much of attention. But let me tell you, advertisers know how to use music to help you buy more. The producers of music composers in movies know how to use it, right? It is impacting you in ways you may not realize.
It is incredible impact. I amazed at certain movies, the soundtrack of certain movies, how they just totally, if you watch the movie without the soundtrack and with the soundtrack, how totally shifts the whole experience. So, I mean, what you're saying is very insightful, very profound, and very unique. It's very unusual. Your gift for pattern recognition and the impact of the human brain and your journey that you've gone through has really brought you to a very unique place in life. It's been a very insightful and enlightening conversation. I really want to say thank you for the time that you spent with us today. Any final words of wisdom?
Well, thank you. Just my gratitude for having me on and sharing this message. And ultimately, I'm really about creating an environment of freedom and connection and playfulness in the world. And this is the path with which I believe it's possible to do so. And certainly I feel like we need more of that in our day and age.
Absolutely. So basically, music becomes the conscious Trojan horse for change and transformation, and consciously choosing the music and the playlist and the meaning you give to the playlist can actually take people away from that highway to hell, get unstuck, and powerfully choose freedom. So you're really bringing a huge contribution to the world and to our audience. But the gratitude's really from us. Thank you. Thank you. Brilliantly done. Well done. And I hope we can get more of Susan in the future.
Sounds great. I would love that.
Thanks for joining this week's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Please tune in weekly to get the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and don't hesitate to share it with a friend who you think this episode can help. With that, thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's episode.